Lightning. I'll call lightning the silent killer because, in fact, what happens around the country when we do have about 60 people die per year from lightning, unfortunately the deaths happen one at a time, and so you don't hear a lot about it on the news. In fact, because of the number of thunderstorms in the southeast United States, Florida is the #1 leading state. Texas is typically #2 in lightning deaths. In fact, last year we had 2 deaths, one on the beach and actually one while walking and one jogging on the beach. Last year across the United States we did really well, 29 deaths across the country, which is about half of what we normally get. So why so many people get killed and injured during lightning storms and thunderstorms? Well, 50,000 degrees. That's how hot a lightning bolt actually is, and it's actually about as round as your middle finger, about as thin as a pencil. It looks much bigger when you're actually watching it outside. But the 50,000 degrees and 300,000 amps and 100 million volts of power, you combine the heat and you combine the power, and unfortunately you have a lot of deaths and injuries across the United States. Now the one big killer that we have in with lightning is what they call the killer bolts. These are bolts out of the blue. What happens typically is that a thunderstorm will be outside, and you have to think about what are you doing when you're outside near a storm. I know many people seek shelter when they're actually in the storm. Of course, they don't want to get rained on. But what about when it's just on the outskirts of town, maybe 4 or 5 miles away? Are you actually stopping and going inside? Most people are not. Unfortunately, and this is where the deaths come from, what they call bolts out of the blue, lightning bolts that come up and over and strike many, many miles, up to 10 miles away from a parent thunderstorm. And of course, a very good trick to determining how far away a lightning strike was counting seconds. 5 seconds for every mile. So if the storm, you saw the lightning bolt and you were able to count to 10 seconds, that was basically 2 miles away. Here's a great little video clip of a bolt out of the blue, and this gentleman is taking video out of his porch. But watch the tree across the street, right there, with little to no warning. Those sparks that you actually see coming off the tree are literally pieces of bark being blown off the trunk. The 50,000 degrees will turn the moisture in the tree to steam and blow off chunks of the tree, including the bark. So if you're standing anywhere near this tree while the thunderstorm is actually ongoing, you could be killed or maybe even injured. So that's why it's very important not to stand underneath trees. So the stats from last year are quite interesting in that 100% of the people were killed that were outside. That means that if you want to stay safe, you should be inside. In fact, 75% male. That's very typical. And also 75% of the deaths typically happen in the summer months, June, July, and August, and maybe even in September. Well, why is that? Well, people are outside enjoying themselves in the recreational activities, right? If you don't have thunderstorms like in the wintertime, then you typically do not have lightning deaths. One thing also, 30% of the deaths were people standing underneath trees. I don't have golf courses on here. Golf courses do a very good job now of getting people off the course. But in fact, about 30% of the people every year are killed while standing underneath trees seeking shelter. Think about where all the picnic benches are in a park. Well, of course, they're underneath trees. And so people are seeking shelter underneath trees, and unfortunately, that's when they get hit and possibly even get killed. We have a great saying. It's called, "When thunder roars, go indoors." I want kids to know it. I want adults to know it, because that's the main safety rule. As soon as you hear thunder outside, you should go inside, because that's going to be the safest place. And don't be the tallest object. We have many deaths that occur actually on ball fields and playing fields where you are actually a very tall object. And stay away from metal and water. You know, the swimming pools, the chain link fences, the bodies of water like the lakes and the creeks and the streams. Those are all very dangerous places to be. Now, can you be injured by going inside? Yes, you can. You still have to be careful, and particularly if you're trying to, let's say, take a long bath. Since the electricity travels through the water, it could actually be very dangerous to be taking a long soaking bath, and if lightning strikes your house, you could actually get electrocuted or severely injured. So what happens in an airplane? Well, believe it or not, this is a great video clip of a 747 getting struck as it's taking off from an airport in Japan. All those people in that airplane are actually safe. It's because the frame of the aircraft, the metal frame, actually protects them. And much in the same way, your car would actually be safe as well. So if there is no safety place to go, or there's no safe place to go outside, like say you're hiking or biking or so forth, go inside your vehicle, roll up the windows, and you'll be safe, because as lightning strikes the vehicle or the plane, it'll travel around you on that shell of metal and then exit down to the ground. So I know it seems kind of strange because it is a metal object, but you're actually in the middle of the metal object, and that's called a Faraday cage, which actually protects you from the lightning and the electricity. This is kind of a rare picture of what may happen if you're outside and lightning is about to strike. These two gentlemen here were on top of a mountaintop, and a thunderstorm was actually forming above them, and their hair started to stand on end. Many of you may recognize that as almost like a physics class experiment where you hold on to that Van der Graaf machine, that one that generates static. Well, what's happening, ice particles in the storm are rubbing together, creating a static charge. And so if your hair stands on end near a thunderstorm, you could be the place right where lightning is about to strike. Storms don't like to be charged up. They want to be neutral, and they get to that point by discharging their electricity via a lightning strike. So if that ever happens to you, if you're outside, you hear a buzzing or crackling sound, that's the sound that may give you that clue that lightning is about to strike. If that happens, you need to seek shelter immediately. Get into that vehicle, roll up the windows, or get into a strong, sturdy structure. It's not good enough just to go to the dugout or to go to an overhead roof. If there's open air, that means electricity can still come in and still zap you, and you can still get very injured with the electricity. These are just some pictures of what has happened after a lightning strike. You have some unfortunate dead animals right along the barbed wire fence as lightning traveled and the electricity traveled along the barbed wire fence. A tree that was basically almost disintegrated as the moisture turned to steam and exploded the tree. You can see a lightning strike at the curb, and you can see the burn mark along the grass as the electricity traveled along the grass. And boy, there are so many times now through Austin or vicinity areas where a thunderstorm comes through and you get house fires. That's a big cause of house fires, and particularly near and around thunderstorms. Lightning strikes that attic. There are all that stuff that you have stored up in your attic starts smoldering. You can even have wires overheat inside the walls. You could have a smoldering fire as the electricity travels through the house. The electricity is trying to travel down to the ground, and your wires and your telephone lines are all conduits of how it will get down to the ground. So unfortunately, there are a lot of